Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing my March wrap up. I feel like March was the longest month ever. Looking back at the first few books I read in March, literally feels like 6 months ago. It was also kind of all over the place. I had some books that I read that I really liked and others that I didn't love. I read 8 books total, 4 romances and 4 mystery thrillers, and of those 8, 2 of them were YA, which is really interesting because normally romance is my most read genre every month, like by far, but I just could not get enough of thrillers this month. They were the only thing I felt like that was really capturing my attention. This year in general, I've just been really into thrillers, and it came to 2,723 total pages. The first book I actually read in my vacation reading vlog I did, so if you want to see my thought in real time, you can watch that too. But it was Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. This is the second book in the Blue Rebel Ranch series. It's a series of interconnected standalones that follow a group of siblings that live on a ranch, so they're all cowboy romances. The first one was Done and Dusted, which I really liked, so I was really excited for this one to come out, and unfortunately I just didn't love this one. It follows one of the brothers who's turning one of their old farmhouses into a bed and breakfast, and the love interest is the interior designer, so she's living on the ranch and working on this project, which is a fun premise. I liked the premise and I liked the setting of the ranch. I think cowboy romances are really fun, but I just didn't really vibe with the main character. I just wasn't a huge fan of her personality, and they kind of explain why she is the way she is, but I still just wasn't really a fan of it, which sucks because I feel like I normally like pretty much every main character. I just didn't like her that much, and I also felt like their connection was very physical, especially in the beginning. The first half of the book, I felt like it was purely attraction, and they like didn't speak to each other or have like an emotional bond, which is what I really look for in a romance. Although I did really like the male love interest in this book. He was really sweet, sort of golden retriever, and I do think the second half of the book they definitely do start to like actually have a connection and talk about things, and it goes beyond just that initial physical attraction. But I still just wasn't a huge fan of this one. But I do like her writing, and I think the series is fun, so I'll continue to read them as they come out. This one just was not my favorite. The next book I read is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is her new release. Another one I was so excited for. I love Abby Jimenez. The two love interests both have the same curse, and it's that every time they date somebody, after they break up, that person goes on to marry the next person they date, and they decided to break this curse that they will date each other, and then when they break up they will find their soulmate and the curses will cancel each other out. But one thing I love about Abby Jimenez's romances is that they always have like deeper subplots that are going on. But in this book, the female love interest is a travel nurse, and she has a lot of trauma from her childhood. She was neglected and she ended up in foster care, and just understandably has a lot of baggage from going through that. And the male love interest actually is getting custody of his 3 siblings. So there's a lot of talk about different family dynamics, the girl and her mom and her adoptive parents, and then the brother with his family and his 3 siblings. I thought the couple in this had really good chemistry. It's not insta love, but it's like insta chemistry, like right off the bat. Even when they haven't met in person yet and they're just talking online, I just felt like they had a good connection and good chemistry. I also loved the male love interest in this. He was everything. So cute, and he put so much effort into dating her. Like, even though he has so much going on, he put so much effort into planning their dates and making sure they spend time together and being there for her. He was just the sweetest. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I think it could have been a 5-star. In the beginning I kind of thought it was going to be a 5-star, but I did feel like sometimes I just didn't really understand the female main character's motivations and like why she did certain things and was holding herself back, which is fine. Like, you can't relate to every main character and like understand them completely. I definitely didn't dislike her, but I just kind of was like, why are you doing this? And it was slightly frustrating. I also wanted a little bit more of the sibling plot, like him getting custody of his siblings. It's definitely in there. It's a main part of the story, but I don't know, I think because I'm just such a sucker for single parent romances, I thought it was going to be more of that, where in reality he doesn't actually get custody of them until like 50-60% of the way through the book. So I was just expecting a little bit more from that, even though what is in there is really good. Overall, I did really like this, and Abby Jimenez is just an auto by author for me. I just love everything she does. I have never read a book from her that I didn't like. Also, this book isn't part of her Part of Your World series that she's doing, but it is connected, and I just think that's so fun when authors like have cameos and connections between their books. It's just so fun. And I reread Better Than the Movies. This is a YA romance. It follows Liz, who used to watch rom-coms with her mom before she passed away, so now she's obsessed with rom-coms and romance. And Wes, who is her neighbor, and they're kind of like enemies, feels too strong, but they don't get along and they like prank each other and fight over this parking spot. But when Liz's childhood crush moves back to town, she asks Wes to help her get him to like her. So he's sort of dating coaching her and fake dating her because they're trying to make the other guy jealous. And Lynn Painter's YA books just hit different. She is so good about writing teenage crushes and first loves and, you know, hanging out with boys and texting them and calling them and going to basketball games and going to prom. And it's just, this is like the most YA romance, if that makes sense. And I feel like she's also really good at writing banter and good chemistry. And I really do like this book a lot. I liked it when I initially read it, I think like 2 years ago. And then I feel like it's so hyped up on like TikTok especially. I always see it. And it's not like I didn't enjoy it. Like I said, I liked it, but I just felt like I was missing something. Like when I saw so many edits of it and everything, I was like, did I just not like this as much as everybody else? Then rereading it, I do get why it's so hyped up, because it is really cute. And I wanted to reread this because she actually is coming out with a sequel to this in October, I think, which is really interesting because I feel like authors never write sequels to their romances, and I believe it's a second chance romance, which I think is actually so fun because I love a second chance romance. And it's, I don't know, I just think it's interesting to read it this way, like have it be two separate books instead of a second chance romance traditionally where you're getting like both point of views in one book. I don't know, I'm excited. I think it's gonna be really good, and so I wanted to reread this before that comes out. And I read another YA, One of Us is Lying. This is a YA mystery thriller where 5 of them go into detention and one of them dies while they're in there. And each character is like a classic high school stereotype. There's the bad boy, the athlete, the popular girl, and the brainy girl. And the student who died ran school's like gossip page. And so after he dies, someone starts posting on the gossip page and confessing to killing him. But everybody thinks it's one of the 4 of them, obviously, because they were the only ones in there when it happened. And so they decide to clear their names. They're gonna figure out who actually did it. So it's an interesting premise. I just think it fell flat for me. I just didn't feel like I felt super connected to any of the characters. I kind of was just about them all. I didn't necessarily dislike them, but I didn't love any of them either. And I kind of kept waiting for like a really big twist or something else crazy to happen. I felt like they were building and building and building, and then I was a little bit underwhelmed at the end. And it wasn't anything like super shocking. I kind of saw a lot of it coming, but I did think it was fun to read a mystery thriller set in high school. I haven't really read one of those before, I don't think. I read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but from what I remember, she's not actually like in school that much, unless I'm misremembering. I feel like in this one they're actually like in school a lot and in class and all that. I thought it was interesting. They also talk a lot in this book about the media, and there's sort of like a media frenzy going along with this case, and there's reporters following them, and it's all over social media, and there's like a show following the case. So I thought that was really interesting to show how a media frenzy sort of affects true crime cases as they're happening. So that was really interesting. I just think overall it was okay. You know, I just wasn't obsessed with it. And I reread The Charm Offensive. I had to reread this because I started watching The Bachelor and I've never actually watched it before, and this is a sort of Bachelor retelling. I don't know if retelling is the right word, but it's a romance set on The Bachelor. They give it a different name. I think it's like Prince Charming or something, but it's essentially The Bachelor, and The Bachelor falls in love with his producer. I have Charlie, who's The Bachelor, but he's really not cut out to be The Bachelor. He has some pretty bad mental health issues. He has anxiety and OCD, and he hasn't really dated much at all, so this is very out of his comfort zone. And he's basically bombing on his first night. He's not doing a good job. Production is like, you need to get it together, and so they send in Dave, who is his producer and turns into his handler. So it's Dave's job to get him to be more comfortable. They go on like practice days. He's living with him, staying with him, coaching him throughout the whole thing. But he also has some mental health stuff going on. He deals with depression. So very fun premise. I love seeing the behind the scenes of the reality TV and seeing them fly all over the place and do the stuff with the show. Then there's also a lot going on with them, which I really like. It's such a beautiful representation of mental health. I think it's some of the best mental health representation I've read in a romance book, and they're just so accepting of each other, and it's just really beautiful. This has become a comfort read for me. I think this is like the third time I've read it, and it's just so good. If you struggle with any mental health things, or maybe you feel like that would affect your relationships or no one would want to be with you because of these things, read this book because it is so hopeful. Also, as you can probably tell from him being the bachelor, Charlie thinks he's straight, so there's a lot of him coming to terms with his sexuality, which I love reading about, especially someone who's a little bit older. The only thing I will say is it veers a little, not cringy, what's the word I'm trying to think of, like sappy. What word am I trying to think of? I don't know. That's gonna bother me, but it does veer like a little sappy towards the end. But other than that, I love this book and I feel like it's really underrated. Then I read The Fury by Alex Michaelides. This is his new release. It's a thriller set on a Greek island, like a private island in Greece, and they're all artist types. The one woman is like a retired famous movie star, the narrator's a playwright, their other friend's an actress. They're spending the week on this private Greek island and somebody dies while they're there. I really wanted to love this, but unfortunately I just did not. It was promising in the beginning. I really like thrillers that are set in isolated places, especially islands. I just think those are always really fun, and I liked that they were all actors. You know, my former theater kid self was really enjoying that. I liked reading about, you know, an ex-movie star and actors and playwrights and all that. In the beginning, I also thought the narration was really fun. The narrator is basically telling you a story and it's like he's talking to you, which I thought was fun. And the first part of this book takes place on the island in present tense, and then they flash back and start giving you everybody's backstories, and that's where I was not obsessed with it anymore. After the first like 20-30% of this book, I actually thought the narration became sort of insufferable. I just really started to hate him, and I just got so tired of it as I got further into the book, and I just didn't think the flashbacks were super interesting. I know they're necessary, you know, to like give context to the book, but I just preferred the present tense scenes when they're actually on the island. And I also did not like the ending to this really at all. Very underwhelming. I think Alex Michaelides' thrillers are just not for me. I really liked The Silent Patient, which is the first one by him, and then I read The Maidens, which I really didn't like, and then I really didn't like this one, so I probably just won't read from him in the future. I think he maybe is just not for me, not in my taste, and I found this really disappointing. The last two books were also thrillers. The first one is Listen for the Lie. The main character in this best friend died. I find her the next morning walking around town covered in blood, but she has amnesia, so she doesn't remember anything that happened that night, and there wasn't enough evidence to convict her, but everyone just thinks it's her and she doesn't even know it's her. And so basically now I think it's like 5 years later, and she's coming back to her small town because someone is doing a true crime podcast on the murder and they're trying to figure out what happened. So she comes back for her grandmother's birthday party and ends up getting involved in the podcast and trying to figure out what actually happened because she has no idea, she can't remember. This was really fun. For a mystery thriller, it's almost lighthearted, which sounds weird to say, but the main character just had a really good sense of humor about the whole thing. Like, she's kind of self-deprecating and funny, and it's just like going along with it, and she's like, I know that this is absolutely ridiculous. I have no idea if I murdered my best friend or not, but like, here we are, this is the situation. Sure, I'll go on your podcast, like whatever. And I liked the small town vibe, and her grandmother is also really funny, and I just was hooked the entire time I was reading this. I listened to the audiobook. I always like listening to the audiobook for things like this when there's like a podcast element to them, because I just think it's more fun and immersive. While I said it is like kind of lighthearted in some ways, there are also obviously a lot of more serious topics going on, and it still is a thriller. I will say though, I wasn't obsessed with the ending. It was surprising, but not necessarily in a good way, if that makes sense. You know, I'm not gonna get too into it, but I wasn't a huge fan of like the twist at the end when you find out what happened. So that definitely knocked it down a little bit for me. I think I still gave it 4 stars because like I said, I was hooked and I did really enjoy it. I just think the end could have been giving a little bit more. But I did like the writing style, so I'm interested to see if she writes any more thrillers in the future. I would definitely read those too. Goodreads never works when you need it to work. Lastly, I read The Villa by Rachel Hawkins, which, side note, has the most stunning cover. I'm obsessed with this cover. I want to buy a physical copy just because I think it's so pretty. This is a thriller that follows two childhood best friends, and they're both writers. The one girl is a girl boss, for lack of a better word. She like writes self-help books and has done TED Talks and has a social media following and is like very successful, that vibe. And then the other friend writes cozy mysteries, and they end up going to Italy and staying in this villa for the summer so that they can both write. So the villa they're staying at is a home to this infamous murder that happened in the 70s. There was a 70s rock star there, and then these two sisters were also there, and one of them went on to write a really famous horror novel inspired by what happened at the villa, and the other woman wrote a really famous album and became a really famous musician after the fact. So sort of like an infamous murder that had happened, and the girl who writes cozy mysteries decides that she wants to try something new, and she starts uncovering secrets about the murder and what happened, and she decides to start writing her book about that. So she gets really immersed in that. So you have the dual storylines going on with different POVs, past and present, and they are sort of parallel to each other, which I thought was really interesting. I will say the point of view from the 70s was a little slow at first. I kind of found it a little bit boring, just like the backstory that they set up, but then it does pick up eventually once you get a little bit further into the book, and I ended up really liking that point of view. This also is not the kind of thriller that is scary. Like, it's definitely more of a mystery, and honestly it almost leans fiction, but I kind of liked that. I also listened to the audiobook for this one, and I thought it was really good. There was a lot of mixed media in this. There's excerpts from the horror novel, there's podcast clips, interviews that people have done, which I just love. I love when thrillers do that and they put like different little excerpts in there. I just think it's so fun, and it fit so well with the story. The setting, of course, I loved. I mean, an Italian villa. What more could you want? Also, okay, I have a fan cast. If anyone else has read it, I need to know if it's just me or if anyone else sees it. I normally am never one. It's like fan cast Harry Styles as, you know, people or characters or whatever. Like, I've obviously seen all his movies, as you can tell I love him, but I just always picture him as himself, if that makes sense. Like, I know a lot of people fan cast him as Gus in Beach Read, and to me, like, I just don't see it, because I would just be like, oh, that's Harry. But if you've read this, Noel was literally Harry to me. He's in the 70s POV. He's like the rock star that sort of brings them all there, and I just could not get him out of my mind. If they ever adapt this, and they definitely could, like, this would make a really good limited series. I feel like Harry gives Noel so much, and I just could not get it out of my head. I need to know if anyone else agrees with me or if I'm just crazy. This, honestly, for a lot of it was giving 5 stars. Like, I was really invested and really liking it. But and that's the thing that sucks about thrillers, is as much as you can love them, if you don't love the ending, it's never gonna be a 5-star, you know? I definitely didn't hate the ending. It wasn't bad. I just wasn't obsessed with it, and it wasn't like super shocking, any of it. It kind of played out exactly like I thought it was gonna play out, which, you know, is fine, it happens. But there was definitely no like big gasp, clutching my pearls type moment, which, let's be real, we all want when we're reading a thriller. But I did really enjoy this. Definitely also, okay, I'm talking for like an hour on this one book, but also Julia Whalen is one of the audiobook narrators, which she does all of Emily Henry's audiobooks, and she's so talented, and I just love the way she narrates things. So if you've listened to any of the Emily Henry audiobooks and you liked them, I definitely check this out, because she, again, just does an amazing job. And I actually kept having to remind myself that this wasn't an Emily Henry book, because her voice is just so synonymous in my brain to Emily Henry. But I really enjoyed that aspect as well, because I just think she's so talented. But I did really like this. Definitely my favorite Rachel Hawkins I've read. I've read a few, and this one is definitely my favorite, like, by far. That was every book I read in March. Pretty successful reading month overall. I'm really excited for the next month or two, because I feel like there are so many exciting new releases coming out, so it's gonna be really fun to get to read all of those. If you want to find me anywhere else, I'll have all my other socials linked down below. Subscribe if you want to, and thank you so much for watching.